Hi, we are back for another Parent Mindset Monday, and I'm here to support you with your questions. So, folks have been sharing with me that they want to, some specific advice about the hardest thing that they're facing right now as a parent. And there are some common themes, of course, as we are all striving to raise resilient, happy, confident children and have a sense of being calm and confident and empowered ourselves as we empower our children. So without delay, let's just dive right into some of these questions. And just so you have some context, these questions are coming from parents who are really wanting to have, more of that feeling of, I got this, right? Like there's, because kids can have high energy and big emotions and, expectations in general can just be tricky. And so we're here to make sure that you get a chance to really hear other people's questions that you might not have thought to ask, but then also for each of you who did take the time to write what it is that you're working on or that you'd like support with to get a little TLC and attention today. Sound good? Yeah. Okay. So let's get started. If you're here tuning in on Facebook or on Zoom or watching the replay, it's always so helpful if you just let us know where you're tuning in from and the ages of your kids. And then if you're here but didn't have a chance to queue up a question yet, go ahead and write the word question in the chat or the comments and then write your question. And that'll alert me that you have a question. If you're watching the replay, tag me in it and then I'll be able to address it directly. Okay. All right. Great. So this first person, her name's Jana, is asking, with her, she has several children. Okay. So she has a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, but then she also has a 19 and 26-year-old stepdaughters and 22-year-old stepson. So Jana, we feel you've got a big task on your hands here with raising kids with such a wide age span. But, one of the things that you wanted to feel into or get some support with is how you transition from being from a challenging step parenthood time to your present focus on your little ones. And I just love how you phrase this. And I think a lot of people can relate to this, especially in the last 2 years. I'd like to heal my parenting PTSD. Now, Jana, I just want to admire you for being vulnerable and sharing with us something that's so close to what it is that you are really experiencing right now. And the first thing I can just say is that, this is not about getting to a destination. This is more about a daily practice and taking small steps over time, because you called it accurately a transition, and a transition from years of one way to what will hopefully be like many positive years ahead does take time and take steps. But what I can tell you from like the motivation research, I think James Clear was the first to put this in his book, Atomic Habits, a 1% improvement over a year. So each day, you have a 1% improvement leads to 37 to 38 times overall improvement. So you can incrementally change things. Now, I guess the difference between step parenting and parenting that I've noticed for folks is that, your role in terms of being like a decider or like the main guide is much stronger. And also you're working with different ages, right? You're kind of starting over with the young ones. So I think the two big adjustments here you're probably experiencing is, becoming more of like a sort of a satellite to the main parenting body, to now being like at the center of things, like more like the sun. And one thing I can share with you is that getting used to being the authority figure takes time. And one of the things that can help with that is to get really clear about where you have influence, because you might have stepped aside before, but now you have influence. So things that you can influence are what strategies the family uses to kind of deal with big emotions and handle them and navigate them. Another thing you can have influence over now is like what the expectations and boundaries and limits are and how you're going to respond when your child is either in bounds or out of bounds. You also have a lot of influence over how daily life runs, like the routines, decisions like when to start potty training, like what like is something you've already probably been mostly through, or maybe in the middle of with your 3-year-old. Decisions about like how when TV and media consumption when like becomes more and more independent, and when you're going to like lessen restrictions and how many hours are okay in a week, that sort of thing is something you now have influence over. So what I would recommend for you, Jana, and anyone else who just is really transitioning into being the primary caregiver, whether that's because you're a new parent or because your role has shifted like Jana has in her family, would be to really consider taking some time to get clear about each of these areas and to organize and structure conversations and learning opportunities for yourself and if you have a co-parent, where you're kind of drinking from the same well or getting some perspective from a similar source, so that you have this really great place to start from, and maybe even continue with. So if that's something you're interested in hearing more about, Jana, I have a lot of ideas about how you could structure that, and you should feel free to hop on my calendar. I have a few spots left this week. It's first come, first serve, friends. I really have been filling up as I've been giving a lot of workshops in the communities, 4 schools, 2 collectives, just a lot of time in community, and a lot of folks signing up. So let me just even see how many spots I have left right now. I think it might be 3 this week, 4. I have 4 spots this week. So Jana, or anyone who's listening who really wants to have a chance to chat through what that could look like, please hop on my calendar. So it's a unique opportunity in January also to join our Immersion Cohort, which, hi Deanna. Deanna's here. She just hopped in as well to spend a year with other parents, really focusing on essential tools and skills that build resiliency in the family and set everybody up for more ease, enjoyment, and success. So that sounds good to you. Make sure you grab a spot, first come, first serve on the calendar. Okay, so Jana, so that's the first thing that I would want you to get really clear about in the transition is all of these areas that you do have influence over. I think that's probably where the all you can probably take in today is my guess. But if more comes up as we're rolling through these topics, I'll circle back to you too. Okay. Now this one's an interesting one, and I love it because it's something we've been addressing through our motivation strategies. But all of us have had more time at home than we would like in the last couple of years. Most of us. Some introverts are thrilled, but even so, being an introvert stuck at home with children, not always a walk in the park, because we, sometimes part of being home is like relishing some alone time, but then you can't relish that alone time when the kids are crawling all over you or have demands or are being clingy and can't, or you're feeling like guilty because they're spending so much time on the screen, and it's just not the same as an introvert's dream of true downtime at home. So I know things come up anyway. And so for folks who are feeling that way, you are in good company, because I know that Danielle and Carmen, who are both members of our group, had questions about this, and like, how can we deal with boredom and loneliness and other parenting challenges that come with the pandemic? Well, first of all, I always like keep in your imagination, keep in your memory what it was like pre-pandemic and the kinds of experiences that you enjoyed as a family. Because I think that sometimes what we end up doing is we think that the only way we can be a certain way, like be inspired or be in the flow, or even certain feelings like feeling connected to nature or feeling connected to family, is dependent on a specific set of conditions or specific experience, we'll call it. Now, that is true in some cases. Like there really is no substitute for like being in the room, holding your relative's hand and looking in their eyes and really connecting. Like you can't perfectly swap that out. But what I would challenge us all to do, especially when it comes to boredom and loneliness, is saying like, well, what were some things we really enjoyed pre-pandemic, and how can we feel or be or experience something really similar, but just using different ingredients to create it? Think of like when you get into the kitchen and you're like the ingredient you think you need isn't there and you're like, oh shoot, but then you swap it out. Like maybe quinoa for rice, even though this dish is usually a rice dish, like let's use quinoa. Well, so I wonder about, let's say getting out into nature and having these, like backpacking trips. Maybe it's something your family likes to do, or getting to go and see a relative or some combination. So it might need to look differently, but can you bring those elements in? Like, can you FaceTime with relatives while you're on a walk outside? And can they be on a walk outside or on a phone and you both describe what you see? Or maybe you mutually watch the sunset together, or maybe you mutually use one of those star gazing apps and go outside and look at the stars together. Like there's all these creative ways we can use technology to stay connected and help the kids feel connected. The other thing is really reviving like home play, like the things that we do at home or the spaces that we occupy at home can really be revived. Like I've seen folks, just really weren't comfortable bringing their kids to the playground because they didn't trust their kids to not touch their eyes and mouth and nose and pick up germs there. And so they had to sort of create their own version of, some kind of physical gym at home. One of my clients, she's a single mom out in Chicago with 2 young children. She, bargain hunted and found these great like rope things with little plastic pieces that you just put on the end of the rope that the kids can then stick under their bottoms and swing on it. And she figured out a way to like mount it up onto a beam in her basement. And next thing you know, she did a bunch of variations of that. And for under $100, like created a whole like gymnasium kind of thing for her boys, and it saved them, especially winters in Chicago area. Has really saved them this winter. So maybe think about like ways you can revamp the indoor space that you have in ways that you just really didn't need to because you were relying on other resources like what's at school or what's at the playground or what's at the cousin's house, places maybe you're not occupying right now. So how can you get the same result with a different venue, or same result or similar result with a different way to connect, for example, with the loneliness piece. I also do encourage you to like find at least one family who will commit to following similar COVID protocols and meeting up, at least twice a month, like every 2 weeks, and really help your kid build that sense of relationship with another family, and for you too, quite frankly. So those are some ideas on that. Now, boredom and loneliness are also things that can lead to lack of motivation. And in the motivation science, boredom would be a sign of low interest or low, like they haven't had a lot of priming of curiosity. So you can also prime kids to feel less bored by just getting curious with them. And especially around the question of like, what could make this more interesting? It's like, oh, it's so boring at home. I don't know what to do. Or, I don't like this. It's so boring helping you cook again, And it's like, well, what could make this more interesting then? And just ask that question and brainstorm and have fun with it. Like maybe it's turning on some music, or maybe it's turning into a game. Maybe it's trying to beat a timer. Maybe it's trying something totally new you've never tried before. Maybe it's like doing a science experiment alongside cooking. Like maybe I've done this a bunch with kids where we're doing a baking thing and we follow the recipe but then we set aside a little bit of the dough and we just decide like, what do we want to do with this dough that would be different? Like put a bunch of salt in it or add a ton of baking soda or, something. And then we'd bake it alongside and they would be like suddenly like watching in the oven, like, ooh, what's going to happen to our experimental, cookie or whatever, muffin, So there's ways you can bring it in that are cheap, easy, free, but you just have to like have the opportunity to think about it and be reminded that that's available. It also teaches kids an important thing, that they can raise up their level of motivation through this interest hack. Loneliness is all about having good company and feeling a deeper sense of connection. And oftentimes it happens to solo children, especially during the pandemic. And that's where I would also get on a schedule of, like I was saying about the play date, but even with certain key relatives or friends of the family who'd be willing to FaceTime with your kids. And you're surprised who is going to say yes to that if you ask. Even just like a half an hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes even, maybe even 10. Would you be willing to hop on and FaceTime with my kid? that would be such a help. And maybe you can strategically plan it for when you're doing like the trickiest thing at dinner, or when you know your kid has been kind of on their own for a while, something they can look forward to. And there are all these like app-based games you can play too simultaneously that you can look up. There's now too many to even mention, where they could even play a little game to kind of ice break and have something structured if your kid isn't much of a talker on FaceTime. Or on video chat, however you're using that. Okay, so I think that addresses some of the boredom and loneliness. And yeah, Carmen, Danielle, and also Jana, curious what you got out of this piece. Let me know. Share a thought or two. And Deanna, who's here, or anyone else who's listening, if something stood out to you, it's always helpful to share it in the chat, because it helps others also track like what the gems are in these Ask Me Anything segments, because I do share a lot of ideas. Other thing that I can, another topic that I thought was so interesting and so important is, let's see, one that has more pandemic related. Yeah, so just let's keep rolling on the motivation. So in general, Ginger Clark and Julie Keller Ramos, so I'll both want to have support on how to keep their child more motivated. And I'm going to do a thing that I don't always do, but I really think it's important that if this is your question for anybody who's listening, there is right now a series of 3 videos up in the Facebook group, and they're not going to be up forever, but they're 3 videos that are hacks for boosting motivation. How to show more than tell, how to connect before you correct, and how to win their cooperation. Go back, check them out, and pull the pieces out that you think are most useful. Participate in the comments when I prompt you to. And what I can guarantee is there's going to be at least one thing in there that you've either tried, but there's a little twist on it that you're going to try something new, a new way to do it, or there's something that worked before and you forgot about. And this is just how it works with caregivers and parents. Like there's no way we can keep everything top of mind. And then I want you to share what it is in the comments and chat of that video and say, Vanessa, I'm going to try this next, and let us know how it goes. We would love to hear. Okay. So yeah, focusing on winning cooperation, showing more than telling, and connecting before correcting. Even if you just have those 3 thoughts in your mind as you next approach motivating your child, of like, how can I win their cooperation? Get into their world and check in with them and show some understanding and all those steps. Or maybe it's connecting before correcting, and I share the 4-to-1 ratio of like, keep it positive 4 to 1 negative, and really leading into what might be a correction, which is a lot of times when we're trying to motivate kids, we're actually criticizing them. Like, hey, how come you haven't done your homework yet? Or why is that still on the floor when you said you'd pick it up? Or whatever it is, like, even if it's motivating them to make a good choice about how they're going to treat their sibling, oftentimes we come at it like we want to fix their problem for them, or we want to correct them and get them to realize they're doing something wrong as a way of motivating them, which is on the table. It works for some things. You just point it out and they're like, whoops, and then they fix it. But if it's something that's been going on for a while and that isn't working, here's the invitation to try the connecting before correcting, winning cooperation, and showing more than telling strategies. And they're all in the group up right now for the rest of the week. Is probably what we're going to have them up for. So do make sure you go check them out. They're the last 3 videos that I've posted that we've done here. So Ginger, Julie, I hope you get a chance to dip into those before they get pulled down. And I support you in, asking this question over and over again, like, how can I encourage my children to be more motivated? And I would even add a part 2, without having to threaten them with punishments or consequences, or dangle carrots of rewards and incentives. What are some ways we can get that needle moving without having to resort to those, punishments and rewards and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, good. So we're going to shift to another topic, which I think is going to be interesting as well. This has more to do with like emotional self-awareness and self-regulation and being able to soothe oneself. And so I'm going to start with younger age and work up to some older kid tips. But oftentimes, if you have older kids, you can still listen to the tips for younger kids, because sometimes you'll hear something that is something like, I'm not saying it is, but it's something like a possible like gap, right? Like something that you maybe didn't have a chance yet to really address with your child. And that can be really helpful, to just hear what it is and be like, oh, that's something we didn't do when they were younger, and something that I do want to make sure that I start to do with my child. So you can be listening on that level. All right. And this is for Maria, Marcy, Noha, and Courtney. And the question is, how do I support my preschooler with managing tantrums and big emotions? So I'm just going to write a little note to Maria, so she knows that I'm addressing her question right now. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, big emotions. Tantrums and meltdowns are sometimes the like most triggering thing that you can be around. For any age, whether it's an adult having a meltdown and tantrum, or if it's yourself. And that's why in our resiliency work, we spend so much time really looking at big emotions. Like in the immersion, for those that are joining in this cohort, or have been traveling with me right now, we have 19 families in our immersion, which is very exciting. Great families. Some of them will be coming to this event for the second time because it's so useful. We're going to be doing a 3-day virtual retreat just on emotional mastery. Like Deanna's going to be there. Deanna, excited for you. Why is this topic so important? Because it's the one that oftentimes, like for the caregiving generation, we didn't necessarily get a lot of great guidance around our emotions. And we're really hoping that that's going to change with us as we are raising more resilient, emotionally intelligent children than maybe we had the opportunity to be raised in that way. So when you are in the middle of a meltdown or tantrum experience with one of your children, I think the first thing that everybody needs to understand is that there are different levels or stages of emotional upset. And that at certain levels of upset, like once you get past a certain threshold, your brain functionality actually does change. And so what we call it in my world, we call it like flipping your lid, because we use this like brain in the palm of the hand model where like your lid actually flips off. And the reason why we use this lid flipping is because it helps us to understand that the brain activity that we usually have that allows us to do things like make good decisions and weigh out choices, and hold more than 2 things in your mind at once, or draw on previous experience, or have a sense of time, are offline. And so that prefrontal cortex behind your forehead, the part that's like right here in the model, is kind of out to lunch. It flips off. And what's running the show, what's more in the center of your brain, is that alarm center, the amygdala, and with a fight, flight, freeze, or appease response. Okay, so that's the science behind it. But like what you're looking for is like, is your child even going to be able to hear any kind of explanation right now? Like, are you going to be able to explain why they can or can't have the thing they're upset about, not having, let's say, or what they're super sad about? Are they going to be able to understand that it's not the only one, there are more, right? If they lost something or something broke, or to really hear that it can be fixed. And so my homework for each of you who wants to be able to support a preschooler with navigating big emotions or tantrums is to become what I call a really great lid detector. Like, how far off is that lid? Like, how disintegrated is the brain activity? And if I'll give you a few signs, although we make an exhaustive list in the emotional mastery weekend, and we really like try to figure out our family members sort of tells, but here's a short list. Looking for any kind of involuntary physical movement. So like kids are like, who are starting to like do this, or like, you can see it, like a tension. Another is just like a slumping where it's just like, oof, or hitting or kicking are really obvious ones. But involuntary movement, it's just a spontaneous activity of the emotional body, like the reptilian brain moving the body through the brainstem, and you're not even necessarily aware that you're doing it. And also facial expressions, right? That, so when you start to see that combined with looping thoughts, in other words, they're not really coming up with new thoughts or If they are coming with new thoughts, it's escalating things, right? So like we call it like digging a hole or going down the rabbit hole, where it becomes more and more extreme. You'll hear things like always and never statements, or you'll hear kids repeating the same hurtful thing over and over and over again. Or they might really be trying to like share their point of view. Like some kids are so precocious, like even at 3, 4, 5, they're going to like just say their side of things over and over again, like, but he started it, but he started it, but he did it first, but he did it first. And it just repeats and repeats and repeats. That's a sign that you're in lid half or full off, and you're actually not going to be able to argue with that emotion. I always say, don't ever pick a fight with a feeling. You're going to want to get things moving in a direction where they calm down. And that's what the whole 6-part series was about in December that we're going to do again in June. Are all these different ways to kind of soothe the nervous system so that you can put the lid back on and be able to think clearly again. But that's a good place to start, is becoming a really good lid detector, so that you're going to be able to detect when you need to just soothe the child, and you're not going to be able to really make any headway in like problem solving or convincing or talking them into something. Okay, so that's a place to start. Deanna says, thanks. I'm super excited for the Emotional Mastery Weekend, to be at that event. Yeah, same. I'm excited for you to get everything out of it, Deanna. It's going to be such a good experience. I'm already like, I'm getting care packages, the last little finishing touches on it. Super excited. Okay, so then I have another question that's sort of all for all ages around emotions. This comes from Chris Cuesta and Renee Boyer had a very similar question. They were both wondering how they and their children can stay calm in challenging moments. So again, being that lid detector, it does make a difference. If you're able to catch your signs and your tells earlier by noticing looping thoughts, always, never statements, physical involuntary changes, getting loud, like hearing yourself getting loud, that's not going to necessarily help you stay calm necessarily, but it will help you regain calm, because you might have already popped up into that state where you're like, lid half off or more. And it helps you just stop so that you do no harm. You don't go down a destructive, or at least in like non-constructive path. And sometimes if you have older kids, it means just stop talking, like just stop talking and actually maybe even take a break. And even for younger kids too, taking a break. But I feel like there's something specifically around teens that if we tried to like kind of steamroll through by talking over them or talking more, they get incredibly discouraged and frustrated, and it can take days for them to recover. Because the theme of the adolescence, and I'm thinking about Deanna, I know you're here, so I can speak to this with your middle childhood to teen and 20-year-old child, is that if they have any sense that you don't get it, but you're still talking at me, they get incredibly mad, like even rageful, and will do and say really hurtful things, because what's going on is that level of being sort of unseen or misunderstood is like so painful for them, because there's nothing an adolescent needs more than to be understood and seen. They just need it, and then to be heard. So if you're finding yourself saying more to try to solve something, try saying less and asking more questions. So that's something to say for those of you who have a little bit older kids. But then the other thing I would suggest is, helping you stay calm in challenging moments is to stack your deck for success by being proactive. So like kind of going back to the very first question, right, around the transition to parenting versus step parenting. One of the things you need to recognize is that you now have like greater influence as the primary caregiver over more things, like the routine and what the limits and the boundaries and things like that. So you're going to be needing to get clear and kind of get ahead of some of that. And so one thing you could do around emotions and your own calm is really like what I do with all my clients is like create a resilience plan for yourself. In other words, identifying key calm down strategies that really work for each of your family members, and also identifying key triggers that tend to set them off, and having a sense of like how to get ahead of that. Yeah, and making a plan as a family of how you're going to support each other with compassion and with strength. And that can be very helpful as well. One of the favorites, I'll just give you one to start with, is a roller coaster breath, where you trace up and down your fingers, breathing in and out. So it's like in, out, in, out. And I've seen adults really like this one too. So it's not just for children, not just for preschoolers. Breathe in and out. You do it with me. And out. Slower. And out. For young kids, I was like, do you feel like we need to take another ride on the roller coaster, or do you feel calmer? Okay. So if you make a family project, resilience plan, identifying the key emotional calm down tools that work best for each family member, identify your triggers, and get on the other side of those, that can actually head off a lot of what you would normally kind of, throw you off and elevate your mood into, challenging places. Okay. Chris and Renee, let me know what you got out of that, as well as Maria and Noha and Courtney. We've talked a lot about emotions here. Curious what you're pulling out of it. Deanna saying lid detector. Oh, that is so important. I do hear the never and always statements. Yes, a very strong symptom. Very strong symptom. So good to listen for. And yes, that happens a lot here in my case. Say less and ask more questions. Deanna, you've already made strides in that and had incredible results. Like even just in the first few weeks of working together, like what we're like 30 days in. I'm so impressed with you. Not even. So I don't know if you want to share a little win in the chat, in the comments to inspire folks, Deanna. But like, I was so impressed with how you shifted the way that you and your daughter in particular were talking about how she was going to catch up on her work. And it really just took a couple of conversations of you listening more and asking more questions and helping her think it through, versus like coming to her with the plan already all cooked, all set, and getting her to buy in. It was more like, actually, how are you going to approach this, and how can I support you? What do you think would work best here? I love it, Deanna. And yeah, I'll let you share the win if you want of what happened next. It was pretty astounding. And so much more to come. So I also have another question from Melinda Mooncase that's a little bit more specific. And this is a good one to talk about, like how we as parents can stay connected even when we're in these times where there's just so much emotion running the show. So she says, how does she help her 11 and 12-year-olds deal with frustrations and struggles while staying consistently connected? So I hear you, Melinda, like that's a priority, right? Because you don't want it to be the result of your efforts, them feeling disconnected from you or less apt to ask for your support. And what I think even more than emotional mastery here could be problem solving strategies. At 11 and 12, kids are ready for, if they haven't had it yet, some structure around like what are their options to address their problems and solve them. So what can be very instructive is to roll them through options of how they can approach a problem when they're feeling frustrated. Because yes, we want to have a plan of how are they going to calm down and de-escalate, but then it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean that the problem is solved. So we also need problem solving strategies. And so one, for example, could be like not necessarily finding a solution immediately, but just talking it over respectfully with everyone involved, taking turns listening and speaking. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've mediated a conversation between two peers or siblings who needed to talk through the problem and take turns speaking and listening. But it is very unproductive to do that if either party has their lid half to all the way off. So that's why we emphasize calming down first. Because it can be very triggering and even more upsetting and escalating if they start to try to handle it. And this person gets a little more upset, this person gets a little more upset. And next thing you know, there's like a big fight. And it's really hard to stay connected when there's a huge blowout happening. So whenever possible, it is actually okay to be disconnected in the sense of like giving people some space to calm down and cool down, and maybe check in on each of them one on one, like equally. And in that, you can do a little pre-gaming around like, well, when we come back together to talk this over respectfully, we're going to take turns to listening and speaking. And I'm so curious, like, from this angry place, this frustrated place that you're feeling, like, what do you think is the most important thing you want or need right now? Like, what do you want to share with your sibling? I've helped kids so many times craft an I statement of how they're going to express their want, their need, or their experience with, and sometimes the impact they've experienced with their sibling or with their peer. And then when you bring them together, you have in mind like what could be going on for each of the people, and you're able to sort of help them take a beat to really hear each other, and then ask some more questions if they need help, being like, well, can you think of like one thing that might be true about what your sibling is sharing with you? Like, could it be true that it could be hard or even annoying when she asks you to stop, but you keep doing it? Is there something that makes sense about that? And oftentimes you can see some softening happen where they're starting to kind of like acknowledge that they're a part of the problem too. And then once you get through that stage, sometimes that's as far as you get. Other times you can sense that they have the capacity to keep going, and you can say, okay, so like how would you like to address this? Like, would you like to find a win-win solution? Do you think you want to ignore it for now? Do you want to make an agreement that you will say something as soon as it starts to bother you, but you'll do it in a way that's like less explosive, like just be like, hey, remember, I really don't like it when you keep going when I say stop. And then maybe the other person's role will be like, when they hear their sibling check in like that, their sister check in like that, they're like, oh, right, you're right, I need to stop. And then they agree to stop. Sometimes you get to that point. Other times it's just about giving them a chance to actually speak their piece. So you kind of have to read the situation. But it's a way to stay connected because you're helping them find their like I message and the essence of what it is they need or want from their sibling. So hopefully, Melinda, that's helpful. Let me know what you pulled out of it. Those of you who are popping in and listening or listen to the replay, let me know what you got that part. Okay. All right. All right. Next question. So let's see. This was also for Katie Short and Kimberly Kistner. We talked a bit about it, but we can talk about another dimension of it. They want help with sibling rivalry. So I'm going to be throwing up them into the comments here and making sure they get tagged. Hi, you two. So how can I better manage sibling rivalry between my kids? Well, okay, you're not alone. I know even Deanna, we've got some stuff going on. We're trying to figure out with respecting boundaries and, maybe a bit of rivalry. So when I think of rivalry, I think of a mistaken belief often. It's often not true that there's a limited resource and that the only way they can get it is by competing with their sibling for it. So there's only one winner. And so they're going to be really competitive in all the games because only one person can win. Or there's only so much of mom's or dad's attention or caregiver's attention. And so they're going to be like, I want more attention, I want that attention because there's a limited quantity. The hardest one that can sometimes be at the core of it is there's a limited amount of admiration, pride, or love that the parent can feel towards their children, and it's a limited quantity. And so they might be competing to have that sense of being, making their parent proud or feeling loved or feeling a sense of belonging, etc. So this is an important one to acknowledge because kids don't really know that. They don't realize that there is usually an unlimited amount of those things that they're fighting over. Like, sure, there may only be one winner in this round of this game, but there's not one winner in the family. Right? Sure, there may be a limited amount of your mom's attention at this moment, but it doesn't mean that there's not enough attention to go around in the span of a week to really get your needs met, right? So the first thing I like to address there in sibling rivalry is really continuing to confirm and reassure and establish that there's enough of this resource to go around. Like even kids would get jealous of, you know, in the schoolyard about, I remember, you know, a lot of triangulation, like triangles, where one friendship started to feel stronger and the one started to feel left out. You all know what I mean. You've either experienced it or seen it. And then all of a sudden there will be these like labels of like, well, this is my best friend and I can only have one best friend, you know? And I'm always like, why would we do that? Like, why would we limit ourselves to one close friend? Like, that sounds kind of sad. What a strange concept. I would always kind of blow it open for the kids. I mean, like, who came up with that? That sounds awful, you know? And even in a funny way of like laughing at it a little, like, that's silly, right? Like, wouldn't it be silly if you could only have one good friend? Jeez. And doesn't that kind of like leave other people out and hurt them? Not only would you like to spend more time with a friend sometimes, sure, but are they your only friend or you're like the best one? Like, I don't know about that. Like, and couldn't that change? Like maybe they're your best, like your closest friend when you're playing sports, but there's this other friend that you're really close to when you're doing your work, or when you're playing a different like imaginary game. Like, don't feel like you need to stick in one area of the yard or one area of possibility, because of this limited resource that you need to, like, you know, stick around. So it's really about opening doors to the possibility and maybe even the truth that there is not a limited quantity to compete over. That can do a lot for sibling rivalry. The other thing I want to address is that if they're competing for like power or attention, you've got to give them other ways to get power and to receive attention than whatever source they're fighting over, whether it's your attention or, you know, or influencing how the game is played or whatever. So let's say it's over power over how the game is going to be played. Well, the simple thing to do is they just get to take turns setting the rules, just like, I don't know if any of you've played Foursquare, but when you get on Foursquare, as soon as you become the person in square one, you get to call the game. Kind of like some of you might maybe play poker this way or cards. We're like, well, which version are we playing? Are we playing Texas Hold'em? Are we going to play, you know, 5-card stud? Introducing those concepts to the kids can alleviate so much pressure around like jockeying for power, because you literally take turns being in control or take turns setting the terms or the rules. So that's one version of sharing power and like giving power like fair distribution, so like the kids can really get a chance to have power, especially if there is something going on where it's off balance. With attention, you know, setting aside one-on-one time for each child, even if it's just 10 minutes a day, especially for young kids, can go a long way. You know, just have it built in somehow. Maybe, you know, you pick up one child earlier than the other and spend a little time with them before you just go rush and pick up the second child. That's one thing I've seen parents do. Or like when one child is has an after school activity that they're going to be later, you go hang out with the other child. That's a nice natural way to build it in. You can also like really structure it as like, I have special time with this child and we really want our privacy, and you really like, you know, make that explicit. But the point is to fill up their attention cup another way, rather than having both of them like competing for you at the same time. And then when you're having that one-on-one time with them, you can sometimes ask them like, what is it that you might need when you are feeling like your sibling is getting more attention? Like, how can I reassure you? Like, can I give you a little squeeze on the arm? Can we maybe make a plan for our next special time, so you know when we're going to have one-on-one time again? Can we have a date this month? You know, that can go so far. So hopefully that's addressed the main two scenarios of power and attention for Katie and Kimberly. Let me know what you got out of that. Please write it in the chat. Deanna is saying, my daughter is advocating for her own accountability this semester with her teachers. That's your win. Yes, she sought it out herself and has turned in everything in the first week. And I'm seeing an accountability shift and a step up. That's huge, Deanna. So proactive. And I know that if you had gone in and tried to steamroll her into a plan, you would have had different results. And I'm so proud of you, the way you stepped back and really like let her sort of express to you and ask her the questions so she could think it through and come up with her plan. And then she went and did more of that with her teachers. And now she's really taking the reins, which is what she's probably wanted the whole time, but just didn't know how to do it. So you helped structure that for her. Really good job. It's awesome. Yay. I love my clients. You're so inspiring. She's saying, wow, that sibling rivalry is real. Never heard this limited view. Yeah, and I get that, right? Like this idea of there's a limitation on what's available, and that's where the competition or the rivalry comes from. She says she wished she had that mindset to share back then in elementary school. That was the worst thing, those best friends, because none of that really mattered at the end of the day. Totally. Yeah, and it's very hurtful, and it can teach you these untruths, right? These kind of lies that there's only so much friendship to go around, which is just a silly thing in the end. But kids will fall into that because they're just so concrete. They're like, well, she's playing with me, so that means that we're good friends and you're not. It's like, well, actually, let's get some perspective here. Yeah, it's not quite that simple, black and white and limited. Yeah. So last question before we kind of wrap up. So this is your opportunity that if you have a question you have not asked yet, we are going to wrap up in about 5 minutes. So put it in the chat. Although if you're here watching the replay, you can put it in the chat afterward. You just won't get a live answer. I'll come back and type an answer. So Terry asks, how do I establish healthy limits with my kids that encourage confidence and respect? Okay, everybody should have some tools in their tool chest about setting healthy limits. And oftentimes we have to sort of reconcile with how limits were set in our upbringing, whether it was our family members or our extended family or our school system, because a lot of us have had, just to be frank, some trauma around limits and authority. And so really having a chance to become very aware of like what you might be unconsciously bringing to the table. I was just talking to a family last night who I was really admiring the way that they were considering these things. They're like, well, we're probably unconsciously bringing in a lot of what they were saying, like, what was the word? Basically crappy, like a lot of crappy models they were around, or even traumatizing models. You can unconsciously bring those in. And the place where it shows up the most is around emotions and limits. Emotions, well, I'd say emotions, motivation, and boundaries. Because it can be very triggering when you feel like kids are not respecting boundaries, and then your lid flips and then you default to what you grew up with, or the opposite of what you grew up with, because you're trying so hard to not do it the way your parents did or the way that you were raised. So this is a great question that has a very long answer. And we don't have time to go into all of it. Like we spend 2 months on this in the program. Actually, it's going to be this coming up month, February, and then again in August, dedicated. And it's a pillar of our program, the immersion. But the basic idea is that if you can get clear about what your expectations are and how you're going to respond when those expectations are either followed or not followed, and you have this discussion where your kids are aware what your expectations are, they get to weigh in on what happens when they do and don't follow the expectations, and you have this conversation with other caregivers, it can be like so relieving. I mean, just think about like, what if you threw a football team out into the field and there's like, well, we don't really have a play, but just like respond however you think is the best. It's like, that's fine on like one-on-one, but like, honestly, if there's going to be this whole concerted effort, where there's like relationships at stake and emotional wellness at stake, like you need a plan, you need some plays. Yeah, you need some plays you can put into place, right? So getting clear and then having those conversations also about how you're going to respond is super helpful. Another thing to learn how to do, and this is just a simple tip for today, would be notice if you're asking for what you don't want a lot, or if you're asking for what you do want. Because kids really do, the human brain will like populate an image just by suggestion. Like if I say, don't think of a blue monkey holding an orange banana. I'm sorry, but if you have a human brain, you probably just pictured a blue monkey holding an orange banana. The power of suggestion is really powerful. So here's a classic. Instead of saying don't run, because then you hear run, especially if you say it over and over again, like, hey, don't run, don't run. Remember, don't run. They're hearing run, 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 run. And they're thinking run, run, run. And they might even, their body might be thinking, oh, run. and they don't know what, they might also be like confused. Okay, so if I'm not running, what am I doing? Do I need to freeze? Do I need to walk? Can I skip? Right? And this is where really smart kids will be like, I'm not running, see, I'm skipping. You're like, crap. That's not what I meant. You know what I meant. And like, do I? Like you're not being clear. So asking for what you do want would sound like, use walking feet. Please use your walking feet. Please remember to walk. We walk here. This is a walking space. We walk inside. We walk beside the pool. It's slippery, so we walk. You've heard walk, 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 walk. And that's really clear what you're expecting. You have asked what you do want, and there's really no space to be like, but you said, you said I need to walk, although like the kids who really want to go there will find a creative way. And that's a whole nother conversation for another time. They have a lot of humor and zest and creativity, which probably needs some help channeling to positive ends, I should say. So Deanna, you are our live question. How do I get the kids to understand their role to contribute to the family? Oh, so good. And Deanna, I'm going to take you through like a 3 or 4 step process that I'm going to outline right now. But as my client, we'll actually map this out. Sit together with the family and ask them to collectively, everybody has a stack of like cards or post-it notes or scrap paper, to write down tasks that need to get done in the household to make the household run. And you just list as many as you can. And you get rid of the repeats until you have like a table full of them. And then you try to sort it into 3 categories. 1, personal responsibilities. 2, household shared responsibilities. And 3, favors for other people. And this is especially helpful for any of you who want to add in allowance for chores, but feel horrible like paying your kid to clean up their own mess. Yeah, we don't want to do that. And then you start to make a plan based on those 3 categories and make it really clear that in order to earn an allowance, it has to be a favor that they do after they've already taken care of their personal responsibilities, pitched in fairly for the household responsibilities, and then they can earn the allowance with the 3rd category. Now, there's more you need to do to get their full buy-in, but that's the first step. And involving them in it is a much better than just posting a chore chart. Posting a chore chart is kind of like saying like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. These are the songs that are going to be on the playlist tonight. How do you think your kids are going to react if you pick all the songs, especially with your tweens and teens? Not great, right? Oh, I don't like that song. Wait, how come there's no, I don't know, Beyonce on this? Like, where's the, they're into blue, like, where's the bluegrass or whatever it is they're into? And so instead of posting the chore chart and thinking like you need to get on top of it and get on top of them, switch it up. Have them be a part of brainstorming and actually coming up with the list and categorizing it so they can start to wrap their head around what they actually just need to do, what they should do, and what they could do. And that way you have a good place to start for when you take the next steps and really get them to a place where it's like a smoothly running household where they're contributing without a whole lot of hassle. Hassle-free household with teens and tweens. Deanna, yes, that's what I want for you. All right, friends, that's what we have time for today. If you have any specific takeaways or things you want to remember, put them in the chat or the comments. I know I tagged a lot of folks here to make sure that you knew kind of where in the video your question was being answered. I'm just going to double check that I got to all the ones I said I would today, so I'm not leaving anybody behind. Yep, we got through all of them. So Jana, Danielle, Carmen, Maria, Marcy, Noha, Courtney, Melinda, Katie, Kimberly, Chris, Renee, Ginger, Julie, Terry, and Deanna. So glad to be able to support you this month. Really wonderful to have you as a part of the community. If you haven't yet, go check out the motivation videos before they come down from this month. And so exciting to be able to be on this journey together. Just like this painting kind of represents to me a community, community that's connected and is beautiful when we bring all of our perspectives and our journeys together. And I'm so happy that you are one of the colors on the palette. So thank you for coming and being a part of what makes Raising Our Resilience great. Deanna says, I had to change my voice observation of the negative and start asking the positive requests of what I need, right? So Otherwise, it just becomes like, ooh, just so many criticisms, and we don't even realize we're doing it, even if it's true. Like we feel like we're just surfacing the problem, but for them, especially if it's something that they should have done or you'd like them to do, it can become very personal very fast. So really great, Deanna. Great takeaway. Deanna says, thank you, Vanessa. Love that direction. Yes, I've got you, Deanna. And again, I think I still have a few spots, on my calendar for folks to grab a spot to chat with me this week and get a free 30-minute consultation. It's a parent strategy session where we'll dive into your most pressing question. Look what we were able to cover where I just spent about 5 minutes on each person's question. Imagine having 30 minutes with me and really getting to share also maybe more personal background of like what it is that's going on for you in particular, or your child in particular, the other caregivers. It's a really powerful session. Folks always walk away with specific actionable strategies. And it is a chance for us to see if it's a fit for you to join the programs that folks like Deanna and other smart parents have hopped into. We have about 10 families that have joined in the last 2 months. And we are launching our official welcome this Saturday. Oh, Deanna says, don't miss that opportunity. That's so sweet. Yeah, and even if you don't end up joining the immersion, the 30 minutes can still be illuminating. And if you've never had a parent coach, it's like a chance for you to try it on and see if it's a fit for you and see what it's like and experience it. I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I like to do things before I really can say I understand or like or know them. So if you're one of those like me, like come and try it on, and there's no pressure to join. But if it is a fit, I will be sharing with you what that would look like and how it works and all of that, all the good details. All right, loves, have a great rest of your week. Oh, we are off next week. I'm going to take a little break as I prepare for my 3-day emotional mastery weekend with my immersion clients. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks for another Mindset Monday. And I'm going to be doing it in a little shorter form so you can get my top tips within the first 2 to 5 minutes. And then if you want to learn more, you can stay on and listen to the rest. So that should be really fun to switch it up a bit, starting in 2 weeks on Valentine's Day. So see you then. Lots of love. Until then, remember that you can be calm and empowered in any moment, especially the ones that test your patience the most. And every time you do that, you're showing up with to create that legacy of love and connection and resiliency that I know that each of you and your children really crave and really want to create together. All right. Until next time, bye for now.